Season 2 of Solo Leveling begins exactly where Season 1 left off, the very next day after Jin-Woo gains his job class. There's no time skip, no long recap, just a direct continuation of the moment this entire story shifted gears. Up until now, everything in Solo Leveling has been framed as Jin-Woo as an underdog. Sure, by the end of Season 1 he's already become an incredibly powerful hunter, but he's still hiding from the world, moving in the shadows, choosing not to stand in the spotlight quite yet. And Season 2 immediately tells us that this won't last. Within the first few minutes it becomes clear, everyone is paying attention now. The girls in his sister's school take notice, the White Tiger Guild is still actively trying to recruit him, and even the B-rank rookies notice that there's just something different about Jin-Woo. There's a very clear message being communicated here. The world has finally noticed Jin-Woo, and that changes everything. But what I love about this opening is that it doesn't simply jump into S-rank Jin-Woo versus S-rank threats. The story is more patient than that. The writers used the Red Gate as a narrative transition point, a perfect blend of safety net and kill zone. It gives us one final controlled environment where Jin-Woo could test the limits of his new shadow powers without fully revealing them to the outside world, and remain safe from the looming S-rank threat. The younger brother, the guy he killed in Season 1, is Hong Kwang Do, something like that. And the Red Gate isn't just a plot device, it's a statement. This is the point where even other hunters, experienced higher ranking hunters, start realizing that Jin-Woo might not just be strong, it might be something else entirely different. And from the moment Jin-Woo catches that first ice arrow mid-air, it's clear he is different now. He is no longer the dead weight, but the protector. He thinks, wow, I've become stronger, but how far can this go? And that question hangs over the entire arc. Of course, not all of Season 1's threads were resolved. Hunter Huang still wants Jin-Woo dead, the White Tiger Guild still wants to recruit Jin-Woo, and above everything, the mystery of the system still remains completely unanswered. And Season 2 doesn't ignore any of that. It carries every unresolved threat forward, but it recontextualizes them inside a much larger question. What happens when the world realizes it might be dealing with something beyond their grasp? And that's why this opening works so well. It doesn't hype Jin-Woo up as the finished product. It reframes the entire story, shifting us from a powerless hunter trying to survive to a rising force that the entire world now has to contend with. And that's the foundation of Season 2. The moment that truly kicks Season 2 into motion isn't a massive battle or a new villain introduction, it's a decision. Early in Episode 2, after defeating the Ice Elves inside the Red Gate, Jin-Woo does something that fundamentally shifts our understanding of his character. He raises Hunter Kim as a shadow soldier. Now on the surface, it looks like a smart practical move. Hunter Kim died in battle, he was strong, shadow extraction was one of Jin-Woo's most powerful abilities, but the implication behind this moment is what really strikes me. This isn't Jin-Woo reviving a nameless monster. This is him enslaving the soul of another human. And that's an important distinction. Up until this point, resurrection has always been framed as a reward for Jin-Woo, a way to grow his army by turning fallen enemies into allies. But when the ability is applied to another hunter, the power suddenly feels uncomfortable. I remember thinking, wait, what? Is Jin-Woo really about to do this? And it instantly becomes clear that something has changed. Not just in Jin-Woo's power level, but in his relationship with humanity itself. Yes, Kim was a coward. Yes, he tried to sacrifice the others to save himself. But the fact that Jin-Woo doesn't even hesitate to try and claim them as a tool is a massive moral shift. And that's ultimately what ignites the entire arc. Because this moment does three important things at once. It raises the thematic question of whether Jin-Woo is becoming a hero or something closer to a monster. It signals to the audience that the story is no longer about simple dungeon survival. It's about how power reshapes identity. And other words, this is the moment Season 2 really begins, not with the gate opening, but with the line being crossed. Right after the red gate closes, the story wastes no time of introducing the next wave of complications. And that's what's interesting, is that none of them come from a traditional villain. Instead, the escalation starts with Jin-Woo's responsibilities. First, we get the subplot of Jin-Ho trying to become a guild master, which sounds minor at first, until we realize that he wants Jin-Woo to be the guild's S-rank cornerstone. So now, instead of just surviving, Jin-Woo suddenly has people depending on him, almost like he's being nudged out of the shadows and into a leadership role, whether he likes it or not. Then, episode 3 hits us with a bombshell. The mysterious hunter trapped in a dungeon is Jin-Woo's father. That one reveal shifts the emotional focus of the entire series, because up until this point, Jin-Woo's goal has been one-dimensional: protect his sister, revive his mom. But now there's another mystery: his father. Tied directly to the greater threat behind the gates, it makes everything feel so much bigger. And episode 4 keeps building that momentum with the elixir of life. This is one of the smartest narrative devices of the entire season. It gives Jin-Woo a clear objective: heal his mother, while simultaneously letting the world around him evolve with bigger threats and deeper lore. And episode 5 doubles down on the emotional escalation. The scene where the mining team reminds Jin-Woo of his old party is small but incredibly effective. It reminds us that beneath all of this overwhelming power, he's still a human who remembers the fear and helplessness was like. To me, that moment is critical, because it means that even as Jin-Woo becomes stronger, the story is refusing to let him detach completely from his past. And that small connection, combined with the first meeting with Hana Cha, that sets the emotional groundwork for everything that happens later in the arc. That's why these early episodes are so effective. They don't raise the stakes through big battles. They raise them through relationships, responsibilities, unresolved mysteries, and that's what makes everything that follows actually matter. And this is where things stop building and start to spiral. By episode 6, the world around Jin-Woo is no longer just reacting to his growth, it's actively pushing back. The high Orc Raid is the first real sign that the stakes have evolved. These aren't low-level mobs anymore. These are organized, intelligent enemies who force veteran hunters to retreat and panic. And what makes this sequence so effective is its contrast. While the raid captain is rallying the team with sheer conviction, even after realizing that no one is following him, he commits to the goal of trying to kill the dungeon master, and he gets tossed around by the dungeon master's telekinesis. And then Jin-Woo responds by tossing one of the orc guards aside like it's nothing. It's a perfect visual parallel to seeing the dungeon master, who turns out to be Tusk, do the same thing to the raid captain, showcasing that Jin-Woo is to the orcs what the orcs are to the raid team. Inevitable. But just as the high orcs threat is neutralized, the story introduces something far more terrifying. The ants of Jeju Island are now crossing the water. From that moment, the tone shifts. Every conversation becomes more urgent. Even Hunter Cha, who has been quietly thinking about Jin-Woo for 2 episodes straight, starts to feel the weight of what's coming. And then we get episode 8, which is honestly one of the best setup episodes in the entire series. Jin-Woo's fight in the Demon Castle isn't just a challenge, it's a warning. The Demon Monarch makes it clear that these aren't random beasts anymore. There are higher beings watching everything. And when Isil hesitates and Jin-Woo protects her from the Monarch's area of effect lightning attack, it's not just a cool moment. It's proof that Jin-Woo is starting to inspire loyalty even among demons. By the end of episode 3, by the end of episode 8, 3 things become unmistakably clear. First, the ants are no longer a hypothetical threat, they're an immediate one. Second, there are forces stronger than S-rank hunters operating behind the scenes. And third, Jin-Woo is evolving into something that even monsters are beginning to fear. And that's why this middle stretch works so well. It doesn't just raise the stakes, it tells us these stakes might be bigger than anything this world's ever faced. And if episodes 6 through 8 feel like the world is starting to spiral, then episode 9 and 10 feel like it's actively collapsing in on itself. Episode 9 opens with one of the most important power upgrades in the entire series, Shadow Exchange. On a surface level, it's just another new ability, but in reality, it fundamentally changes the stakes of every future encounter. Jin-Woo can now appear anywhere, at any time, instantly. What makes this episode hit emotionally is that, for once, Jin-Woo isn't using that new power for combat. He's using it to revive his mother. And when she opens her eyes and calls his name, Jin-Woo isn't a hunter anymore. He's just a son. The emotional release is incredibly important because it gives the audience a brief moment of relief right before the story pulls the rug out again. And episode 10 immediately shifts right back into the external threat. Instead of celebrating Jin-Woo's accomplishment, the world is quietly panicking. The ants are growing stronger, Japan is sending their best S-rank hunters, and for the first time in the entire series, we hear a question that feels genuinely terrifying. What if even Jin-Woo can't stop him? That line marks the beginning of the rising climax, or really almost the end of it. 15 S-rank hunters unite for a single mission, which sounds incredible, but that number alone tells you how desperate the situation has become. We've never seen this many top hunters in one place at the same time, and the fact that they still might not be enough creates a tension unlike anything in season 1. By the end of episode 10, the world isn't just waiting for Jin-Woo to act, it's begging for him to. And that's what makes episodes 11 through 13 so effective. They aren't just a climax, they're the answer to everything the story has been building toward. After 10 full episodes of build-up, episode 11 hits like the opening salvo for a war film. The Jeju Island Raid doesn't feel like a dungeon crawl, it feels like a last stand. Korea's strongest hunters are dying, Japan's elite strike team is being torn apart, and the Ant King isn't just killing people, he's one-shotting S ranks like it's effortless. In any other series, this would be the final act. The hero arrives right as everything collapses, but what makes Solo Leveling special is that Jin-Woo isn't treated as a guaranteed victory. I mean, not by N-World at least. By us viewers, he probably almost definitely was, because he was for me. But even though he steps onto the battlefield, the question is still whispered, is this finally an opponent even he can't beat? The Korean S-rank hunters genuinely start to doubt if Jin-Woo has what it takes to kill the ant that killed Goto. But he arrives. The moment he appears on Jeju Island, the energy of the entire arc shifts. Hunters who are seconds from death stop running. The ants who have been unstoppable up to this point freeze. It's one of those rare scenes where hope doesn't just enter the story, it crushes the despair that came before. What follows is a 3-phase battle that serves as both a physical and emotional climax. Phase 1 is strength versus strength. Jin-Woo and the Ant King trade blows. It immediately becomes clear that this is a different kind of fight. The Ant King is faster and stronger than anything Jin-Woo has faced so far, but this is also the first time the Ant King realizes he's facing something that isn't entirely human. Phase 2 is ability versus ability. Claws, spells, regeneration, mobility and speed, every tool is pushed to its absolute limit. The Ant King tests Jin-Woo's limits, and Jin-Woo adapts to every single one of them. But the real turning point comes when Hunter Chaw's life enters the equation. Jin-Woo realizes that he doesn't have time for this fight to continue, and he needs to wrap it up. It's a time versus purpose kind of fight. It's no longer about victory, it's about saving someone. And in that moment, Jin-Woo does something we've never seen him do before. He's willing to sacrifice the elixir of life, the very reward he spent the entire arc chasing, to save another person. And that simple choice turns a spectacle into a statement. The Ant King falls, Hunter Chaw survives, thanks to Jin-Woo's revival ability, and Jin-Woo doesn't just win a battle, he redefines the power structure of the entire world. By the time the ants are wiped out and Jeju Island's curse is lifted, everyone knows what happened, even those who weren't there. Jin-Woo is no longer a rising hunter. He's a national level force, a hero to some, a potential threat to others, and to the monarchs watching in the shadows, a new king has just entered the game. The moment the Ant King falls, the world changes. News spreads faster than the bodies are even cleared from Jeju Island. But behind the headlines, something far more important starts to happen. Other nations begin to take Jin-Woo seriously. Up till now, he's been a local anomaly, a rising Korean hunter with suspiciously fast growth. But a single man wiping out an entire S-rank dungeon turns him into a global variable. The United States sends observers, China starts running background checks, even the Japanese Hunters Association, humiliated after losing most of their strike force, quietly labels Jin-Woo as a potential strategic threat. This is the real consequence of Jeju Island. Yes, the ants are gone, but now the world realizes Korea has just produced a hunter who might be stronger than entire nations. At the same time, the monarchs who are watching from the shadows interpret the battle very differently. To them, Jin-Woo isn't a hero, he's a new king, one whose power is evolving at an alarming rate, and that shifts the story's entire trajectory. The next threats will not be random dungeon bosses or isolated beasts, they will be monarchs. Jin-Woo doesn't know it yet, but his victory on Jeju Island has put him on their radar, and in a strange way, it also puts him in their place, not as a pawn in someone else's game, but as a legitimate player in a war much larger than anything the world has faced so far. So yes, the world is celebrating, but it's also preparing, because now everyone knows the balance of power has shifted, and Jin-Woo is standing at the center of it. When you step back and look at the full arc, the most significant change isn't Jin-Woo's power level, it's how he chooses to use that power. At the beginning of Season 2, he's operating almost like a lone wolf. He avoids attention, he refuses guild offers, he focuses only on grinding and securing the elixir for his mother. His mindset is still rooted in survival. But as the arc progresses, two things start to shift. First, Jin-Woo gradually becomes more comfortable being seen as a leader. He starts protecting people even when he doesn't have to, mining Team Hunter Shaw, Isol. He willingly stands at the front of the Jeju Island Raid, not because someone ordered him to, but because he knows no one else can. Second, his motivation evolves. It moves from, I need to protect myself and my family, to, I have the power to protect everyone, and therefore I should. The moment he considers using the elixir of life on Hunter Shaw is basically a culmination of that transformation. Hunter Shaw, on the other hand, goes through a much more emotional shift. She starts the arc as an admirer, curious about Jin-Woo's power, but by the end of it, her admiration becomes conviction. Her fight on Jeju Island proves she's willing to lay down her life, not just for her country, but specifically for him. Even though her development is fast, it never feels forced, because the story gives us plenty of moments, small moments with eye contact, internal dialogue, training scenes, all that builds up to her final decision. And Jin-Ho gains confidence as a future guildmaster, and he begins to show actual leadership, not just ambition. Jin-Woo's mom serves as an emotional anchor. Her recovery reminds Jin-Woo why he started the journey in the first place, while Jin-Woo's father is still a mystery. But his ominous appearance near the monarchs connects him directly to the larger conflict and foreshadows his importance in the next arc. Season 2 explores a surprising number of themes, but 4 of them really stand out the most. First, power versus responsibility. The central question of this arc is simple. If you're the only one who can save the others, do you have a moral obligation to act? And Jin-Woo spends the first half of the arc trying to stay in the background, but by the end, he's literally stepping on a battlefield no one else can survive, and the arc's answer seems clear. Strength without responsibility eventually turns into cowardice. Now, the next thing would be hero or monster. Jin-Woo's shadow abilities blur the line between hero and villain. The resurrection of Hunter Kim, the shadow army surrounded him like a dark crown, the way even demons begin to fear him. All of it raises the question, at what point does the savior become the very thing people fear? Third would be humanity versus systems. There's a subtle tension between Jin-Woo's own free will and the mysterious system guiding his path. Is he becoming stronger because he wants to, or because the system is pushing him toward a much bigger purpose? Season 2 doesn't really answer this, but the ambiguity itself strengthens the narrative, suggesting that even the protagonist might be a pawn in someone else's game. And then last would be love as humanization. The arc introduces a quiet but powerful message. Love makes strength meaningful. Jin-Woo reviving his mother, protecting Isol, and risking everything to save Hunter Cha. These moments humanize him, not for the audience, but for himself. They remind him that there's a reason to stay human, even as power becomes increasingly inhuman. One of the most effective tools Solo Leveling uses in Season 2 is its visual contrast between light and darkness. Throughout the arc, darkness is consistently associated with power, ambiguity, and transformation. Whenever Jin-Woo summons his shadow army, the atmosphere literally darkens, covering him in a visual reminder that his strength is rooted in death. This isn't framed as evil though, but it is meant to feel unnatural, consistently reminding the audience that his power doesn't come from traditional heroic sources. In contrast, light is used to represent humanity and emotional grounding. Scenes with his mother or his brief moments of honesty with Hunter Cha are often warm, brightly lit, and grounded in everyday environments. That visual separation reinforces one of the arc's core tensions. Jin-Woo is constantly moving between two worlds, the human and inhuman. There's also a recurring use of environmental symbolism. Cold environments, barren landscapes, frozen imagery tend to coincide with moments where Jin-Woo's emotional state edges closer to detachment. Meanwhile, scenes tied to relationships or memory, like the mining team flashback or his mother's recovery, are framed in softer color palettes, symbolizing a return to warmth and humanity. Overall, this arc uses visual language as a thematic compass. Whenever the world becomes colder or darker, and more monsters, Jin-Woo becomes to look more like a monster himself. And whenever the world warms up, he starts to look like a person again. That brings us to the last section. Season 2 doesn't just conclude an arc, it repositions the entire story. Up until this point, Solo Leveling has largely been framed as a power fantasy about rising through the ranks, and after Jeju Island, that framing no longer applies. Jin-Woo is no longer just progressing through a system, he now rewrites it. The world knows his name. Other nations see him as an asset or potential weapon, and most importantly, the monarchs have acknowledged him as well. Which means the enemies moving forward won't be S-rank hunters or dungeons, they will be other kings. This arc also creates a permanent tonal shift. Season 1 and the early parts of Season 2 operated in the realm of mystery and survival, while Season 2's ending pushes this series into a new genre entirely, mythic conflict. It becomes less about leveling up and more about who controls the fate of the world. In short, Jeju Island ends with the rise of Jin-Woo and begins with the reign of Jin-Woo. So that's why I think Season 2 of Solo Leveling isn't just a satisfying sequel, it's the moment the entire story finds its true identity. It raises the stakes from a regional to global, it shifts Jin-Woo from a survivor to a sovereign, and it proves the power only matters when it's used for something greater than yourself. If you enjoyed this breakdown, let me know which arc you want me to cover next. And as always, thank you for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell to be notified. I'm the Story Sage, and every great fiction has deeper truths.